changing lanes. You don't have to get quiet yet. She went to change her lane.
One,
She just went to change her lane.
two. Oh, let me just click. I hear myself. Levels.
Can you hear me?
All
Hello,
right, if
hello?
nobody else have notes, then I don't have to put my notes in.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank my staff and the folks who work with them to put this together. Give them a warm round of applause. Obviously, I want to thank all of the panelists who are here. Then our moderator is going to introduce them in a second. I did think that it was important to do something on this day. I was here with Reverend Al Sharpton and Ben Crump and some of George Floyd's family on the day of his funeral, and we went out to his gravesite a couple of months ago. And I certainly didn't want to do this then, but I thought it'd be appropriate today. So I want you to know that I'm Rodney Ellis. On behalf of the people of Harris County, I hereby declare today George Floyd Day in Harris County. And if anybody doesn't like it, they can get over it. I thought it was important that we do something to commemorate this day. We've seen some progress, but we still have had a lot of pushback. A lot has changed since George Floyd's murder. People are still punished for being poor, sick, and unhoused. We've lost generations to slow and steady violence of mass incarceration, health disparities, and economic neglect that rob people of color, in particular, of opportunity every single day. Law enforcement transparency remains incomplete. Use of force policies are inaccessible to the public, and there's no independent oversight in Harris County. Communities that cried out for justice in 2020 are still waiting for relief, and the daily realities of oppression and inequality still exist. There's work still left to do. We made some commitments after George Floyd's funeral. 4 of us on Commissioner's Court at the time went to his funeral service, the one that was in Houston, and we came back and passed a series of items in a thoughtful way. We didn't just try and adopt something on the fly. We called for a series of studies and thoughtful research on what we would do. And some very positive things came out of that. But there's still work left to do. There's still work ahead. And progress only matters when it becomes practice. It becomes policy, not just a tweet or a soundbite. We do know how many agencies have adopted a use of force policy. We don't know how many have adopted use of force policy. All county constables should adopt and actually enforce a unified, transparent use of force policy that earns the public's trust. One thing we learned with so many people marching in our city and all around the world is that law enforcement has a difficult job, and they can only accomplish it if the people that they are sworn to protect have confidence in them, and that's what helps to solve crimes. We must keep pushing for an independent oversight board that can hold law enforcement accountable. The county should continue to fund and expand alternatives to law enforcement like our HEART program and our violence interruption program. We expect the police to do too much. Everything that comes up, we want to call the police, when sometimes maybe a mental health expert or a social worker would be the appropriate person to mediate it. The public defender's office must keep growing. I think that office was handling about 6% of the cases when I came to Commissioner's Court in 2017. It's probably hovering a little below 20% now. One of the items that we did was make a commitment to grow it to 50% in a couple of years, and we have not done that. Data must be public so residents can clearly see where reforms are succeeding and what is falling short. This is the civil rights movement of this generation, a movement that demands we protect our communities from every form of violence, including from police brutality, including from poverty and neglect. So I wanted to have this forum today. My staff really asked for it. There are a lot of things I asked for, but they asked for this one. I want to introduce the moderator for tonight. Judge Darrell Jordan is a leader. I knew him, I met him as an intern in my program at the Texas State Capitol. I won't tell any of those stories, but he's a seasoned attorney, senior defense counsel with the Texas Army National Guard, where he has served for more than 2 decades, upholding integrity and justice with military courts. He previously served 8 years as a judge for the Harris County Criminal Court, number 16, where he helped lead misdemeanor bail reform and other initiatives to promote fairness and equity in our local justice system. Before taking the bench, he practiced as a criminal defense attorney and worked as a policy advisor for the Texas State Senate. I happen to be that senator that he worked for. But he also did so in the Texas House of Representatives for another great member. He graduated, as I said, from Texas Southern Law School, but he's also a graduate of the University of Missouri and then the Thurgood Marshall School of Law. His lifelong commitment has been to public service, legal reform, and he's a principled leader across many spheres. He took the lead. At the time, the only person in his party on the misdemeanor bench. And Judge, I remember asking you and the then district attorney in Harris County and the sheriff, but you were the only judge. We gotten elected to meet with the plaintiff's lawyer over at the law firm here in Houston to talk about what was going on in the lawsuit. We were told we could not do that once we took the oath, so we did that before we took the oath. And the sheriff at that time made a commitment. He did not want to be taken out of the lawsuit because he thought the sheriff had a role to play in resolving that issue, if there was a possibility of settling it in particular. You were the key witness in the federal court on the witness stand, and you took a lot of heat for that, and I appreciate you for that. Give Judge Darrell Jordan a warm round of applause. Next, you will see a short video, and then the voice after that you will hear will be Judge Jordan to introduce the other panelists. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for joining me here as we honor George Perry Floyd Jr., a son of Houston, a son of 3rd Ward. In 2020, over the course of 8 minutes and 46 harrowing seconds, Floyd's murder pulled back the curtain on the worst aspects of our criminal legal system. Suddenly, the world could no longer ignore the racism underpinning our justice system. The world demanded change.
Say his name! Say his name!
Marches broke out in 2,000 cities, not just in Minneapolis, D.C., and Houston, but in Paris, Tokyo, Moscow, and Athens. Millions of people across 60 countries shouted the words, "Black Lives Matter." Justice for George Floyd, our brother from CUNY Homes, just 10 minutes from here.
And if any one of y'all knew Floyd, man, all he wanted us to do was stand together, represent whatever we stand on.
In my office, we proudly call ourselves a civil rights organization inside the government. So we got to work, mobilizing every resource Harris County had to offer. We passed bail reform measures because freedom shouldn't just apply to those who can afford it. We put more resources into our public defender's office so that more people, regardless of race or wealth, could receive legal representation. We invested in reentry programs and expanded diversion programs that help get people back on their feet instead of sending them to jail. We also created the Holistic Assistance Response Team to send trained professionals to provide support instead of armed officers when someone is in crisis. These reforms were important steps towards recognizing the dignity in all of us. And it was important to me that Floyd himself was remembered not just his death, but the man he was in life. So now we can take a seat next to his statue at Tom Bass Park, where he'll live forever to inspire the community that raised him. The legacy of George Floyd lives on, but there's still so much unfinished work. Racial disparities in policing are still very real. Black and brown residents in Harris County are still more likely to be stopped, searched, and jailed. They still disproportionately face a housing crisis, health disparities, and food insecurity. So we march on. We fight for services that treat people with dignity, like mental health care, youth opportunities, and workforce training. We stand up for transparency, equal justice, and equity. In 2020, Floyd's daughter, Gianna, famously said,
"That came from where?"
He most certainly did, but he's not done yet, and neither are we.
Mic check.
All right.
All right. I didn't want to have to stand up and start using my Army voice. I don't have any problem doing that. Going back to what Commissioner Ellis stated, he said, clap for the staff. I didn't know whether I should clap or stand up because y'all were clapping for me, because when you work for Ellis one time, you a staffer for life. That's just how it works. Now, everybody who's worked with him, they know what I'm talking about. But one of my professors in law school, James Douglas, he would ask us about cases in class. And sometimes you could tell who hadn't read the assignment because they would just start mumbling, making stuff up. And he said, if I wanted to hear that, I would have gone to the barbershop. So I think it's very important that each person up here introduces themselves and tells you about their expertise. So when you hear them speak, you will know they are speaking with authority and with their credentials. So I will pass it first to Ms. Tiffany.
Hi friends, my name is Tiffany Echeverria and I'm the Executive Director of Collective Action for Youth. CA4Y is a nonprofit dedicated to community organizing for young people. We focus primarily on juvenile justice, and we have an incredible Credible Messengers program where we are able to mentor young people who are making these decisions every day, life or death. Are they going to be becoming a part of the system, or is this going to be their opportunity to really spark out on their own and do something amazing with their life?
All right. Next.
Dr. Larry D. Brown Jr., Associate Director for Community Health and Violence Prevention Services at Harris County Public Health. We do a lot of things at Harris County Public Health, but the one thing I will lift up, since we're talking about George Floyd, we are one of 2 divisions that Commissioner's Court approved to be created under public health to address violence from a public health approach. I have been in Harris County, working for Harris County since 2006, and in my former position, I was at the Juvenile Detention Center as the facility administrator pre-COVID, during COVID, and just on the other side of COVID. So I'm sure we'll cover some of that today.
All right, next.
Yes, Brandon Dudley. I currently serve as Chief of Staff for Commissioner Ellis. Started my work as a juvenile counselor doing social work, and then later went on to do more civil rights work, and then met Commissioner Ellis doing that work, and he told me, you talk a lot of good mess, why don't you come inside the government and do something about it? And so then I've been with him and working on those issues ever since. But I've worked at places like the Innocence Project, the Racial Justice Project in Northern California, and happy to be here tonight.
And last but not least, Genesis.
Good evening. My name is Genesis Draper. I serve as the Harris County Public Defender, the Chief of the Harris County Public Defender's Office. Fairly new in that role, just rounding out my 3rd month. Prior to that, I served as an Assistant Public Defender for 13 years, taking a small detour into the judiciary where I served with Judge Jordan for about 6 years, and went there, much like Judge Jordan, specifically for bail reform and a lot of initiatives that were happening at the time. I'm really happy to be here and see so many familiar faces, and looking forward to this conversation this evening.
I recently got married, and my wife is a psychiatrist. Before I met her, I really didn't understand mental health. I grew up in the country where mental health was addressed with a belt. Go get your behind in the bed, go get that belt, pull that off that tree. And oftentimes when people would come in before me, I'd be like, okay, well, when you get out, you go get your medication. And I thought it was just that simple. When you get out, you go get your medication. Similar to like your kid come home from school and they say, well, Daddy, I want to play sports. I need to get a physical this weekend. Okay, we can do that. It wasn't until my daughter got diagnosed with ADHD, and she had to go see a psychiatrist to get medication. I called Texas Children's. They told me it was 6 months. Legacy told me it was a year. And then I ended up having to get a private psychiatrist. It was $700, not even for an hour, for 45 minutes. And he had to see her 3 times before he would diagnose her. Immediately, I felt crushed inside because I used to let people have it. No, you will be on your medication before your next court date, trying to motivate them to get it. And I think a common theme that we've heard so far is people have dealt with juveniles. And I think it's a good place to start when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, because those people who go through it at a young age, they become used to being in the system, and sometimes it's hard to change the track. When you start, it's hard to finish right when you started wrong, if that makes sense. And so we can just go down the line, and you can kind of talk about what you see in dealing with youth and their struggles. And then we'll let the good doctor pick up from there and go on down. And Genesis has a unique perspective because she served as a judge for 6 years and represented people and has seen the final verdict when it's not addressed on the front end. So we can talk about those things. And if you know some promises that were made during the George Floyd era that speak directly to that issue, bring it up and say, hey, these things have not changed. I'm still seeing kids who aren't getting medicated or have someone. I think recently HISD pulled psychologists out of schools. But go ahead.
So we're very fortunate to be able to work with our young people who are currently in crisis. And so they come to us with a lot of different issues going on, whether they're struggling through housing and working through the dynamic in their family, maybe with their grandparent or their parent. Or potentially maybe education. They want to do their GED. They don't want to go through with their high school diploma because of issues that have happened during K through 12 schooling. And so as we're working with them in crisis and getting them to start to form plans for themselves that they feel like they can stick to and that make them feel empowered, we get to see a change happen pretty quickly where they're able to see what it is that they want to see change, but then also they're kind of looking to the left of them and to the right of them and seeing how there's so many things run in common in their community. And from there, we're doing a little bit of connecting the dots and some power building and seeing how are your stories so similar to those who are growing up right beside you, or maybe even your brother or your sister or your uncle. And when we talk about what we saw during 2020 and some of the promises that we saw come down, not only from what we thought we were going to see through legislation and potentially comprehensive standards around policing and that not happening, there's those elements, but we also thought we were going to see more from our corporate friends, our corporate sponsors, the folks who had pledged billions of dollars to go flooding into our communities, that were going to sponsor young people going to and through college. And I see young people talk about, hey, how are we going to really see change in our lifetime when everyone who says that they're a part of this movement or wants to see change happen abandon or fall off? And so as we're working with our young people, we really try our very best to keep them motivated and keep them embedded in their own story. And then from there, just really see, hey, what can we do down the street? What can we do in this neighborhood in order to make this a better place? And so really just talking about those micro changes.
And I always talk about how I grew up, and then I found out that was trauma. I thought everybody got whooped with an extension cord. I'm being dead serious. I thought that was just the norm. And so what it turns out is many who come from our neighborhoods are living with trauma and don't even know. They don't know why when somebody disrespects them, they feel like they got to knock them out or kill them. But it's the trauma that they've dealt with throughout their lives. Larry, you want to kind of speak about mental health and trauma and whatever's on your heart?
Whatever's on my heart. Thank you. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s in, as I call Los Angeles, California. So in Watson, Los Angeles, in the prime of things. And so trauma, whether it's from being whipped with an extension cord or hearing the helicopter, right? It's not normal to hear a helicopter circling around your neighborhood. If you've never experienced it before, it's something to behold, right? It sounds like a war zone. And then we had window panes. We had the wooden window frame, so the glass would shake when the helicopter flew low enough and to see that light, right? And people who experience that on a regular basis become desensitized to that. That becomes the norm in talking about traumatic experiences. And I see the same thing when I was in the juvenile detention center and talking about access to our exposure to violence at a young age, right? People used to always joke with me about Boys in the Hood and said, is it like that in LA? I'm like, well, you might see a dead body. You might hear some gunshots, right? But when we desensitize ourselves and that becomes the norm, that's trauma, right? When I saw young people in a juvenile detention center, it was a very humanizing experience for me. And let me rewind and fast forward and then pass the mic. My best friend at 17 got 27 to life. And we had been friends. My grandparents and his grandparents were church members. My mother and his mother went to high school together. And then he and I started elementary school together. We've been friends since we were 3. And so he celebrated his first birthday free at 46. And so when I was asked to leave my position as a racial disparity and fairness administrator, the first one under safety and justice, I'm sure we'll get to that, and come to the juvenile detention center, that was a real big change for me. One, in rhetoric, I'm really not for the institutions because they don't do what they should do and need to do. And then my orientation to juvenile justice is different. I'm education trained as an education researcher. My degree is in educational policy studies, so that's my lens of things. I look at everything from a lens of equity and understanding. So when I walk into the detention center, all I see is my classroom. I see myself, I see my friend who got that time, and I think about the traumatic experiences and talking to the young people. I would let my paperwork stack up on a desk. It's gonna get done, the state will get what they need, the county will be satisfied. But in having conversations with young people, talking about access to guns, talking about exposure to gunshots and violence, talking about different things around not having resources. Those are traumatic experiences coupled with we don't always hire the best people. If we're gonna be honest, we're gonna be honest. And we talk about transparency. Not proud of it, but in my time there, 80 people had to go on my watch, 8-0, in 3 years and 7 months, because these are somebody's kids. I don't care what they're there for, we're there for their care. And so if you're just traumatizing them all over again, if you cuss it, kids gonna cuss. That's what they're gonna do. They're gonna fight. That's what I expect them to do. They're teenagers. A lot of boys in there, and so that's something that will happen, but you don't have the right to mishandle somebody's child. And so I would think about the parents that I would talk to, because I would take the phone calls myself, transfer it to me, transfer it to me, transfer it to me. And I would talk to parents, and it would come see me. Come down and let's talk about what's going on. And I would review some of those things. I had to testify with the state several times over. So the traumatic experiences continue on. They continue on in adulthood, and I would see the staff re-traumatize and oppress the oppressed.
And just for a quick second, when we go back, when Tiffany was talking, she was like, when they come in crisis, and you can see them getting better. But, you know, if y'all didn't know, in Texas, you can go to jail starting at 10.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I had to quit practicing juvenile law because when I would go to the courts, they would be shackled at the ankles, shackles around their waist.
Yes.
And they would come to court like this. But you can go and it's a murderer in the district court, and they just walk out with the regular handcuffs on. And I never understood, why would you treat a child like that when the goal should be to reverse their direction and go and take a different path? But when you have a kid and you're doing that to them, it's just like when I got to Saudi Arabia. I had my full army uniform on. It was 122 degrees, and we were sweating. After 2 weeks, that was regular weather. It would get down to 100. We'd be like, man, it's cold in here, you know. But the mind just adjusted. It just adjusted. So when you take somebody who's 10 years old, 11 years old, and you treat them like a criminal, and they don't have any positive influences at home, how do they then see themselves? And so, Brandon, known Brandon a long time, kind of talk about what the system was designed for. And is it doing what it's designed for, or is there some type of flaw in the matrix?
Try to get me fired right now. I mean, I think that's something that disturbs me a lot of times, because you see these incidents of police violence, and you say, oh, like that was a bad apple, or that was, I'm like, no. That's not a glitch in the system. That's what the system was designed to do. That's a natural outfall of a system that's designed for oppression and discrimination across the board, right? I mean, that's the roots of it. I mean, we after George Floyd, we felt like we had a revelation in this country. We all said we realized this is a system that came out of slavery, right? You didn't really incarcerate that many people during slavery because you didn't have to, right? And so you went into Jim Crow. You kind of had a little bit more than post-Jim Crow civil rights movement. All of a sudden, you have a quintupling of the U.S. incarceration rate. I mean, that's astonishing, because you invented a war on drugs, right? Where we have a system where we know that drug use rates are the same across racial populations, but you're 10 times as likely in Texas to go to prison for drug possession than if you're white. And that's the same way on every state in the country, and that's not a coincidence. Like, that's an intricate design that it takes to create that amount of injustice. Like, you can't get that much injustice by accident. So, again, I hope I'm not in trouble, and so you have a system that really wasn't necessarily designed to make communities safer. It was designed as a way, okay, post-civil rights movement, how do we create a massive new incarceration complex and police forces to, you know, disenfranchise folks, do those types of things. And now what we're trying to do is alter a system that wasn't ever created to make communities safer. So you're starting with a really tough foundation. And I hope I'm answering your question a little bit here. And then, so how do you have a way where we rethink and reprogram ourselves of what really makes communities? What does safety look like? Like, that's housing, that's food on the table, that's access to good jobs. That's not more guns in community. If that was the case, the United States would be the safest place on the planet. We incarcerate people at so many times the rate of any other country in the world, but we have the highest homicide rates. And we see that data decade after decade after decade, and we don't change the system. And so it can't be, if people say unintended consequences, that's not unintended consequences. Like, we have the information in front of us, yet we don't choose to do something different. And I think in 2020, we felt like there's this glimpse of hope that we really can change this system and make it something different. But now we're back to incarcerating people for sleeping under bridges, right? I mean, think about that. We're taking away voting rights again. We got National Guard in communities for immigration. Like, so we're sliding back to this thing that we all said we cared about when we saw that video during COVID, yet you don't see that massive will to continue that movement to create change. So I'm not sure if I answered your question at all.
Brandon, we can sit here and listen to you talk for the rest of the day.
All right.
And everybody needs to recognize when there was a crack epidemic, when that was going down, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, where were people going? They were going to prison
Opioids.
for residue or for a small rock. But now fentanyl came around. Where are they going?
Yep.
Treatment.
Yep.
Treatment. And so we have to call it, and to me, when I used to go around giving my stats and talks on bail reform, I would try to, I would never bring up that the system was racist or whatever. I just put the data on the screen and say, y'all do the math. And with that, I'll transition to Genesis and let her talk about what her career is so diverse. Talk about how you've seen the effects of everything that everybody has mentioned so far.
Yeah, so I've seen it from a lot of different interesting perspectives. I mean, first let me say I started my career as an assistant public defender. My first day, I was in the juvenile division. And I lasted about 2 weeks because I was like, this is a child. I don't even know how to talk to this child about a 17-year sentence. They've not lived 17 years. They can't comprehend what I'm saying. That just wasn't my ministry. And I really could see that this is a child. And even when I was in court, this is a child. This is my neighbor. This is my cousin. These are people that I know. And you see judges wag their fingers and give all these speeches. And I'm like, you might as well be Charlie Brown up here talking. This person is from a completely different perspective, completely different reality. And so all your finger wagging in the world is not going to give them the resources that they need to be successful in what you're asking them to do. It's so frustrating. People, especially here in Harris County, we are all about wanting to talk about what we're going to do about crime. What are the courts going to do about crime? By the time it gets to the courthouse, it is too late. We're letting them decimate our public schools. I have a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old in public school right here in Harris County, and the funds are being stripped out of our public school. It's not going to be a thing anymore to be able to get a good education for free. That's just disappearing. While we're all standing around watching, they're creating the Hunger Games, people are running to private schools, and there's nothing wrong with private schools, but they are creating this scarcity where people are running to private schools, pulling their money, public dollars, and taking them to private schools. And so what do you do with a society that's undereducated, that's unhoused, doesn't have food, doesn't have access to health care? Are they just going to stand around and watch the rest of Houston ball out of control? No. And so then when crime starts to manifest, then you want to point fingers everywhere but the places where you've divested. We are not divesting in police, never have. But we are defunding our public schools, we're defunding our mental health services. Those are the things that we have got to focus on. Or else all the rest of this, we'll just need more of these services because we're leaving people with nothing.
Yeah, my grandmother used to say, we got to cut it at the root. She didn't even say root. She said root. But what we're doing now is we're trying to deal with it, at the top. Yeah. When the flowers are budding, then we want to call the police or whoever else to come deal with it. But if you look at Baltimore, their murder rate has gone down like 50 or 60% in the last 2 years. That's because they've gone and invested in communities, right? When Genesis talked about, all the people here in the courtroom was blah, 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 and one time I fell for that, because I was like, I asked the kid, have you taken the ACT? Because my kids were applying to college. Have you taken the ACT and SAT? They were like, no. I was like, are you going to school? No. My dad said I don't have to go to school because I can do construction. You know, so I had to catch myself because I'm thinking they come from the same type of environment that I now am able to provide for my kids. But everybody should be able to get a good education. You should be able to get on your walk to school or get on your neighborhood bus and go somewhere and get a good education. But that's not the system that we have. It's just not. And when those kids, there's nothing worse than a kid or an adult who's helpless and hopeless. And in my opinion, it starts like this. Bobby's in the back of the class. They call him, Bobby, can you read the next 2 pages? And then Bobby's stuttering. He can't read. He can't pronounce the words. What happens immediately at recess? Everybody talking about him. Bobby don't ever want to come back to school again. He's like, why would I do that? But then he go in the corner. He see Mike with them 20s and Vogues. Oh, can I make some money with you? And so then that's become his safe space. That's become a place where he's accepted and uplifted because he's out there making dope runs and bringing back good money. And so we have to invest in our schools. We have to invest in our schools and teachers. And Tiffany, will you kind of talk about how you like whatever technique you all use to get on the students' level, on the youth level, and connect with them? Because I imagine you can have the best program ever, but if you're not connecting with those kids, when they leave you and go back to the other people who are there with for the next 23 hours, it can all be erased. So how do you, what techniques do you guys use to connect with people?
Yeah, and I think it really starts with hiring and having the right team working with the young people. And so for our Credible Messengers program, we're able to hire young people who have been impacted by the system. And so they have their own adversity that they've overcome, and they're able to talk firsthand experiences with this young person. And you can tell the team this, I think they're so cool. Like, they are so relatable, they're so funny, and no matter what, what job they're looking at with the young person, that sometimes young people may not want to work at McDonald's, or they may not think it's desirable to, work in their neighborhood. But when they're sitting there with Ed or they're sitting there with Jace, and they're like, this is the job I worked in order to feed my family or to get started, it really encourages young people to start there. And so I think that it really does matter who you have working with the young people. They have to be passionate. This has to be something that is a part of their purpose to be here. And making sure that you have the right team is paramount.
All right. Do you have a story you want to tell about how you whatever technique you use, you broke through and the rest of the staff couldn't get to them, and you came down with your expertise and broke through?
I was actually going to talk about my team, but I'll say something about that and move on. No matter what, you have to humanize everyone, right? Because I would go inside, if you've never seen the inside of Harris County Juvenile Detention Center, it's the 1950s Harris County Jail with fresh paint and fresh floors. That's what it is. They did take up the stainless steel tables. They are so uncomfortable, by the way. But I just would meet them there, right? I was sitting on their bunk. If it was school time, they know I don't talk during school, but I will come in TA because, to be quite honest, we have industrial strength kids in the Juvenile Detention Center. We need the most qualified, and I'm saying it on record, we need the most qualified teachers in that place because oftentimes our kids are 3-4 grade levels behind. And when I talk to my colleagues in curriculum and instruction, if any of you are educators, I say, what does the training regimen look like for a teacher education program inside of juvenile justice? And they say, you know what, we don't really look at education like that. So meeting folks at that level makes a difference. I'm going to say a couple of words about my team, the Relentless Interrupters Serving Everyone. We serve in 77021, 33, and 51, so Sunnyside, South Park, South Union, Greater OST area, and then north in Cypress Station. We do violence interruption work, and let me distinguish between the difference. We work with the person at the highest risk of being a perpetrator or victim of gun violence. Plain words, we work with shooters. We work with shooters. And so to hiring, we hire those with lived experiences. The average age of a violence interrupter is pretty old, around old for young people, 35, 40. In LA, they have a guy that's 68 he's still running the organization, but he's the most respected, can't be touched person in LA. You have to connect at that level. When I'm talking to my guys, and if I'm out there, they see the young people and they're able to connect because they're from those neighborhoods. So they'll approach them like, hey, OG, how you doing? You know, from a respect. And then they already know who they are, right? But they say, oh, when I was running this street, so-and-so ran the block. And then they find out, oh, that's my dad, that's my uncle, and they get in that way, right? Unfortunately, it's generational, but at the same time, you have the opportunity to touch a generation. Yeah. If they've never picked up a gun, that's the best time to do prevention. And if you have to intervene, that's the best time to do intervention. And our team has intervened with cousins literally about to draw down and shoot one another over something frivolous and stupid.
Thank you. Brandon, I think back to sitting in court, and then I would have somebody in there who was having a mental health crisis, and the parents called the police. And in the nicest way and in the softest tone possible, hoping nobody else in the courtroom could hear it, but everybody could, I'd be like, can you get the parents up here? And then I would tell them, ma'am, sir, please don't call the police when your son is having a mental health crisis. And because, if you have a hammer, everything's a nail. And so you don't know how to deal with it. So kind of talk about some of the alternatives to calling law enforcement when someone's in crisis.
Yeah, so I think, look, we started the HEART program here in Harris County, and much appreciation to Dr. Brown for the work that he does with that. And look, that's not a crazy concept. That's all that we're saying is rather than continue to make Harris County Jail the biggest mental health facility in the state of Texas, like let's send real qualified social workers out to the scene to like work with people and actually help address the issue that's going on. And whether or not you care about keeping people out of cages and reducing racial disparities, it's also a much more cost-effective way to actually address the problem, because if you just keep putting somebody in a cage and say, hey, fix your mental health problem, guess what? That doesn't work. Because they're going to get out, they still got the same issue they had. So if you send qualified health professionals to the scene, you're actually going to keep them out of jail, you get them back on track. And so I think there's solutions across the board we can do like that if we're more willing to invest in things like healthcare and not just invest in putting people in cages to solve problems. And I think Genesis touched on this. That's not how wealthy people solve the problem. They put their kid in treatment, they take them to a facility. So why should low-income folks be stuck with the only place I can send my kid to get any kind of help is to a prison system? And so it's, you get two different systems of justice in this country, one if you're wealthy and one if you're not. And I think, so there's ways we can invest. And so the HEART program has been a really good first start. I think we need to continue to expand it. Like it's a good first step, but we're still locking up thousands and thousands of people every year in Harris County for mental health issues, for really no other crime other than they don't have enough money to have a place to sleep, or for simple substance possession. I think it's setting up programs like that divert people out of the system in the first place and connect them to the services that they would have if they had money in the first place. Yeah.
Excellent point. In Boston, what they do is when people get out, even when they come in and get medical treatment, they have teams that will go out and find the unhoused and make sure they have their medicine. And I know somebody in this room was thinking like, well, I go to work 60 hours a week and I got insurance and they don't do that for me. Well, do you want to go live under the bridge? So we can't, if a program comes forward where dollars are going to be spent to help these people, we have to realize it's cheaper to go help them than it is for them when they go to the emergency room, and then we get hit on the back end with our insurance anyway, right? And so keep those things in mind, because when leaders step out and say, hey, we're going to try to do this, then immediately other people are going to attack them and say, hey, now y'all, this is what y'all doing with our money, you giving our money away to, and y'all need to be singing in the back. Y'all need to be the chorus behind them saying, no, this is what we want. It keeps all of us safer. Genesis, I know now you're the head of the Public Defender's Office, but when we set up the MAC, kind of talk about like the wraparound services. I remember it was immigration attorneys, social workers, and I don't know if you're doing that in the Public Defender's Office. Just talk about because it's, when we get up and do our job as a defense attorney, You may get 5, 6 visits with them, 15, 20 minutes each time, and then they're gone. And so the importance of wraparound services and things that continue after you're done, that would be tremendous. It would make all of us safer. I know it would cost some money, but it would be safer.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's what definitely distinguishes the differences in the outcomes that we see in our office at the Public Defender's Office. Within my office, in-house, we have social workers on staff, we have doctors on staff, psychologists, mitigation specialists, peer navigators, people who've been where they are to walk them through the process. Yes, of course they can hear from a lawyer, but they're not trusting this lawyer who has not lived their experience. And so we have all of those individuals to help the lawyer that's representing them and the client get from point A to point B. It's important if the person doesn't have state identification. They can't move around. And so before we go trying to just help them resolve this case, it might be helpful to help them deal with other issues that reduce their chances that they will encounter the criminal legal system in the future. So that's a really distinguishing part of our office. We, thankfully, through the support of Harris County, we are one of the most, I would say, the most resourced office in the country. Even some of the best known offices don't have the resources that we have. And so I really do think it's making a huge difference in the outcome. When I served as the judge, I would have lawyers that would come before me, and they would come from back, the back and the holdover, and they would say, "Oh, my client has mental health issues." I'm like, "Okay." They're like, "Well, I don't do mental health cases. I can't do mental health cases." I'm like, "How?" All the people in our system, we round up all the people in Harris County that have mental health problems, and we arrest them. How are you even a lawyer that can't deal with that? And so when we created the MAC, we wanted to make sure that part of, and when I say MAC, we have the Office of Managed Assigned Counsel. So if you cannot afford an attorney and you're not represented by the Public Defender's Office, you're represented by private counsel. And previously, there was no oversight to that private counsel. Whatever they did was what they did, and they just sent us the bill for it. What we decided to do was, one, give them independence from the judiciary. So there would be some management, but it wouldn't be by the judges. And with that oversight, though, came resources. So when they got that client that had mental health needs, they could call back to the Office of Managed Assigned Counsel and say, "Hey, can I get a social worker to kind of come over and visit with this client? Let me know what a good next step would be." Most defense attorneys are solo practitioners. It's just them. Maybe a paralegal or an assistant. And so they don't have the same wraparound services that a full-service public defender office might have. And so it was important to us to make sure that people who were appointed counsel but were not fortunate enough to be appointed to the public defender's office was still able to access those services and good representation. Because it's pointless to just try and attack the criminal case, because they have to go back to their life, right, and find their way forward. And so you want to make sure that they have the resources and the support to do that.
Yeah, no, I want to give you all some data points before I move on to the next person. It says just this week, over 1,200 people in Harris County Jail reported being homeless. 7,000 have a mental health indicator. All right, and so now those things happen with the people that Genesis deals with and the other court-appointed lawyers, but what if Grandma and Big Daddy got together and put their money together and hired a lawyer and representing the grandson, and he goes to court? The lawyer gets some probation, says, "Hey, yeah, you got a serious case, I got you probation for the next 10 years. Is that person gonna make it? Because they don't have those wraparound services. Nobody's there to provide that for them. And so when we look at some key changes that could be made to the justice system altogether, I'll go down the line and give me your wish list if because you got to realize people who come to the courthouse, most of them have some serious issues. Now, sometimes you'll see the little kids and adults come in there and they'll have suits on and they look great. That's probably because they got a DWI, got caught with some cocaine. They're going to be okay, all right? But then you have other people who come in there pants sagging, smelling like weed, cussing out the bailiff. I'm telling true stories. When they hit the courtroom, and at that point, it's like, how can we help this person? They need those services. And so we'll go down the line, and this is in the line of talking about changes that we would like to see. And you can stick to your industry, or you can talk about the criminal justice system. What, if you had a wish list, what was 2 things you would ask for?
Well, if I could have anything happen, I would love to see the county spend money differently. The safety and justice budget now, amounting to over $1 billion. I think we could do something different. I hear time and time again so many creative thoughts, and really the landscape is changing. We have all embraced that this is racism and this is discrimination and that these are long-standing things and we could be doing things differently. But then we really struggle when it comes to reimagining the system. It's like no one wants to take that first step, or there's not enough public support through registered voters who then make it to the polls to actually see that change happen. And so ideally, we break the wheel. I would love to see us realign the budget so that we're putting money into diversion, into prevention, into these programs that give us the return on investment, so that they don't have to make it to the courthouse, that the first time we meet our young people, they're not in handcuffs. That's my big dream. And I'll just have one dream. That's it.
Okay. All right.
Just 1 or 2. Everyone has talked about school and public education. And I'm going to start there because that's where I am. I'm the grandson of a sharecropper from Sabine County who moved to California in the late 40s and 50s. You all know those stories. And this is a true story. And he dropped out of school in the 6th grade because he was a sharecropper and the family needed to be taken care of. All of us went to public school. My grandmother was the first high school graduate. My mom and that generation went to college. Education is one of those things that when you get it, they can't take it away from you. Unfortunately, I didn't go to school HISD, but like many of the other school districts, people are graduating functionally illiterate, right? Can't read a balance sheet, have taken trades out, have taken the arts out, like things that keep people going to school, right? When I went to Washington High School in LA, you can look it up, award-winning band, opened up the Playboy Jazz Festival. You all know what that is. Everyone has heard of it at least once. And I was playing on the drum line with the Rolling 60s, with some people from Hoover, but those things kept them in line. Fix the education piece, add all those other pieces, and then scale safety. To your point about the over $1 billion budget, you have to scale public safety. The operative word in public safety is public. The operative word in community safety is community. You all are the public, you all are the community. If law enforcement was the answer, we would be, again, safe. And I'm not saying that law enforcement is not needed, but maybe not to the scale of where we are. We have Alternative 911. I have to plug that because I oversee that. And it's working. Many of you have come down, I've seen you, I've heard your name in Commissioner's Court and advocate for it. I'm not saying it because I work there, I'm saying it because I see the difference. We take a long time to hire the people we hire for a reason. Again, it's a humanizing experience, and you can't just put anybody out there. Whether it's our crisis intervention specialists, who are those social workers, who are cross-trained with an EMT, who can respond to some basic level things that won't clog up our emergency room systems, that you don't have to pay extra taxes for at a fraction of the cost of what you would pay EMS and law enforcement. Scale, safety, the same thing with violence interruption. Those who are most proximate to the problem are most proximate to the solutions. And that's an opportunity for us to continue to invest. You all are taxpayers, you make the decisions what you do, but you have to scale safety and do that in a very communal way. One of the things that we'll be introducing is our public safety roundtable model, really engaging all those in the criminal legal system, really engaging law enforcement at the front end to look at shooting reviews when there's a shooting. And if it's an opportunity for where we're already intervening, or it's an opportunity for us to go, or someone else to go, if that's an opportunity to scale, and you can get that shooter, that 1%, that 0.5% of the population that's causing the majority of the shootings in the areas. and you have an opportunity to intervene there. They won't see jail, right? And then we don't clog up the Harris County Jail more than what it is. And ironically, I bet you it'll address racial and ethnic disparities.
And Brandon, before you jump in, I just want to make this explicit statement, express statement. No one up here is anti-law enforcement. If somebody's in a building shooting, I want to call 911. I want to call 911. I don't want to go. If it's a building burning down, I want to call the fire department. That's not what we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the injustices. Let's fix those and then invest in communities, and I guarantee it will make us safer. Again, when you go home tonight, you get on between scrolling on Facebook before you go to sleep on Instagram, Google Baltimore murder rate. Has it gone down? And then read about the things that they've done. All right, Brandon.
No, and one, just to piggyback on your point real quick, I mean, the first people that would usually say that we shouldn't be spending our time on mental health cases, poverty, are good law enforcement officers, because when they're doing that, they're not addressing violent crime, right? And I think, you know, it's hard to just say one thing, but I think it would be, to piggyback on Tiffany's point, is to reimagine a system that's truly about safety and uplifting communities, and not one that's just about protecting existing structures of wealth and power, right? Because that's what we deal with too often. And I think the other point you made is, because Harris County and folks here really are tried to dig in and do some of that, the state went and changed the law completely and said, you can't reduce law enforcement budgets anymore. And on top of that, we're going to put a revenue cap that's reducing your revenue every year, so you continue to increase money that goes to law enforcement, decreasing money for public health, decreasing money for housing across the board. So it's, oh wait, you all want to change this system? Let us try to lock you into that real quick. But it's why it's even more important that we make those strategic decisions to be more about safety now than it's ever been. But I think your point is right on, and look, it's hard to limit it to one thing, but it does have to be a whole systematic reimagining of our approach. And I don't have as many good anecdotal stories as Larry, but I'm going to learn to play an instrument next time, and I'll be able to tell you good one too.
It helps.
All right, Genesis.
So I think one of the things that I've thought about is within our court system, because I do think our court system will exist in some capacity, even as we reimagine. And, you know, especially for a city like Harris County, where we are so massive and the parts of the county are so different from other parts of the county, how we do our court system. And when I first took the bench, I heard about a community court out in Chicago. It was a neighborhood community court. And so I wanted to know more about it. I flew out to Chicago. I had contacted the judge and asked if I could sit in, see how it works. She was like, sure, I'll, you know, pull back the curtain, let you see how our court works. So I land and I go to the court, and it's in like this building, right? Like almost like a community center. So I was totally confused. And I walked in, and there was a bailiff who was armed, I mean, you know, in his uniform. And when I walked in, he was like, oh, hey, welcome. And I'm like, hey. He was like, do you want a snack or something? I was so confused, like, what? Maybe I'm in like the wrong place. And I was like, yeah, I'll take one of them snacks. So he gives me a snack, some water, and I walk into what I expect to be a courtroom where I see like a judge in their robe and, you know, probation officers and all the things. And there's like a circle of chairs. And there are people starting to gather with their snacks, sitting down in this circle, and court begins. And I was so confused by the whole setup because I'm so used to our traditional. I couldn't tell who worked with the court, who was charged. I was like, what, what's going on? Because people were kind of sharing, you know, first just sharing what's going on with them, talking about what they're working on. But there was like a baby, there was like a woman with a baby on her hip that was there speaking. I was like, okay. I assume with the baby, okay, maybe she's one of the people accused, because surely she doesn't work with the court. She was from the community who staffs this court every month. She lives in the community, so it was in her best interest to come and see this healing take place. And so I came to know these circles as healing circles, where you spend time basically trying to repair the harm that's been done in a criminal case. And so the person that is accused of inflicting the harm, maybe the person that has been a victim of the harm, members of the community, members of the court, they engage in dialogue and meaningful ways in which a person can repair harm. It was like nothing I'd ever seen. It blew my mind. And all I could think was, wow, what if we had something like that in Harris County, where they don't have to come all the way downtown in a place that is completely foreign to them, to be forced into services that don't fit what they need. If they could be right there in their community and engage with their community members on how to repair the harm that's been done. So far from what we're used to here, I literally couldn't recognize. I was in there completely confused. And she had to describe it to me afterwards, what was happening. She was talking to me about some of the people that were there. There were people there charged, two young men that were sitting there next to me talking when we first got there. And she said, yeah, they both are participants in the court, and we generally don't put participants in the court who have some like pre-existing beef, for lack of a better word. But it accidentally had occurred in this situation. And one of them's brother was known in the community to have killed the other one's brother. So there was a lot of repair that needed to happen there. But by the time I saw them, they were sitting next to each other. They had rolled there together because they both got jobs at the Reynolds aluminum factory during the course of this healing. And so they had become friends through like working at the same place. It happens. It can be different than what we do. It can be different than what we see down at the Harris County Criminal Justice Center. So I just want our communities to demand more than what they're being offered.
And I'm gonna come back to you, Genesis, but I'm gonna plant something in you and Brandon right now.
Okay.
There was this judge, and I loved him, Franklin Bynum, and he believed in doing away with the prison system. And so, when you talk about reimagining, I want you and Brandon to start thinking right now and kind of give us like, when we reimagine incarceration, what would that look like? And then I'm gonna go back to Genesis. I believe that was kind of a restorative justice program.
It was.
Yeah, yeah, and when somebody just said we have to ask for what we want, well, Genesis, I think she said it. That's something that takes the judiciary and the DA's office, right? Because we have to quit thinking, there was this guy in Galveston, I think he had 5 or 6 DWIs. He went to jail, whatever amount of years, and you know what happened the day he got out? He got another DWI and killed somebody. So that's our current incarceration system. And when my little brother went to jail, I hope he ain't watching on none of these things, you know, they sent him down to Hidalgo County. He was in prison down there. And then he sent me a letter. He said, this is my email address. I want these 2 magazine subscriptions. Of course, I didn't respond because I'm like, no, you need to take your whooping, but that's what's going on. And you all know Texas has the best prison rodeo, I think, in America. And the animals go to AC. Where do the humans go? No AC. In a concrete box. So imagine somebody telling you, you know what, you're gonna be safer. We're sending somebody to TDC to sit in the sweat box all day, and when they come out, they're gonna be happy-go-lucky and go be your neighbor. That doesn't make any sense to anybody. And so now that I've chubbed a little bit, to give them some time to think of this incarceration system, or, you know, I think about the system in China where they have them out there cutting the grass one thing at a time, and they don't even lock the doors, and nobody leaves. And the recidivism rate is so low. So it is possible, but we have to be able to think outside of the box, or not even think outside of the box. I love, you know, my thing when we were doing bail reform, I wanted to know what were best practices. We don't have to make anything up. Let's just travel around, Google, and try to find the best practices and put those in place. Tried and true measures. So I know I'm putting y'all on the spot, but y'all can do it. Just no judgment, but just talk about what would that be? Would incarceration only be reserved for rapists, murderers? What if somebody was a drug dealer? How would you deal with them? What if somebody was a drug addict? And you can, no right or wrong answers. We just talk, it's a safe space.
Where are we starting? I was listening to the rodeo story. I mean, look, Judge, you actually don't have to look that far. Most of the nations around the world do not do what we do. We just live exactly what you said. We're kind of indoctrinated into this incarceration epicenter of the world, and so we just think like, oh, this is how it has to be. Like, countries all over the world invest more in education, they invest more in healthcare, they invest more in housing, they invest more, and guess what? Their incarceration rate is, minuscule compared to ours. So it doesn't take that much imagination. You just open your eyes and be willing to learn and look at other ways of doing things. And look, these systems are just created by people, right? So they can be changed by people. And I mean, as much as we're all saying this is messed up, we can change it. But it's up to us, right? It's like nobody's coming to save us. We have to get involved and speak out more and get more involved, and either have to change the policies or change the policymakers. And so, look, times are bleak right now, but people have overcome much greater odds in the history of this world, right? And so I guess what I'm saying is, it doesn't take that much imagination. There are replicable models, and we just have to have the will to stand forward and get the leaders that will help us change it and move forward.
Yeah. You got anything?
Everything Brandon said.
There you go.
You know, when you have what you need, you don't have to go look for what you want. As Brandon said, I mean, we have everything we need, I believe, to make the changes we need, whether it's healthcare, housing, whatever the case may be. It's true. I got all the anecdotes. You're right. It's unfortunate that I've seen 11-year-olds, folks come into the juvenile detention center, and that's their healthcare, right? That's their physical exam. That might be their first time getting eyeglasses. And they'll cut them right out there, you know, right outside the building, and that might be their first time. And all of a sudden, they perform better in the classroom. That's not a classroom. For those of you who are not acclimated to the juvenile detention center, I keep on saying humanize everything. That's going to be my answer no matter what. The problem is capitalism, and the answer is humanizing everything. And I can give you some support for that. But if you've never been to the Harris County Juvenile Detention Center, where they sleep, where they eat, and where they go to class is the same place. They don't see outside and touch the outside atmosphere until they go to placement, or if they need outside medical care. They get all their medical, everything there. So if you are, you get some outside light, but it's through a window, and it's through a window. So it's a bypass that has light, and it's indirect light. I don't think that's humane. For a young person, undeveloped brain, have some issues. So humanize the experience. I'll say this one thing I did. Some judges and the judges didn't get mad, but a couple of probation folks got mad. We have a football league. We play between the pre and post adjudicated facilities. They say don't mix the kids. I'm like, if they're in pre, they're gonna go to post. And they could not believe who I asked for and advocated to go play football. He's in here for murder. I don't care why he's in here. He's going to play football because your kids are at home playing football. And that was some of the most rewarding and most humanizing and childlike encounters that I ever see. No fights, no beef, no anything. So humanizing everything Brandon said, and everything will be said.
It's so deep, but there's a lot of opportunity out here for improvement. But we could have all the answers, but we are powerless without you all. It's just that simple. We are powerless without you all. When these issues pop up, and I guess, as they say in church, preaching to the choir, because y'all took time out to come in here today to listen to us talk. But, we have to touch not 1, 2, 3. With LeBron James, he said, I'm going to win not 3 championships, but we got to touch 10 people and say, this is why this is important. Talk. Oh, I thought you said, talk to your kids at school. Say, hey, do you feel safe while you're at school? And statute of limitations ran when I was a kid. I grew up in Albany, Georgia. You Google it. When I was there, it was the murder capital of the United States. And we didn't have 100,000 people. That just let you know what was going on every day. And we went to Michael's and got some Etch-a-Sketch pens, but it wasn't no pen, it was a razor. And we carried those every day to school because we didn't know if we were going to get jumped, shot, whatever else. When you were leaving the football game, they would say, hey, man, you got $1 on you? And I said, nope. And the dude slapped me. He said, you lying. And went through my pockets. And he was bigger than me. So I just, yeah, boy, it's in this pocket right here. You know, I mean, you had to do, but could you imagine if you've never experienced anything like that, when you see these kids and they're in there for murder, you're like, oh, he's terrible. How did he get? You don't know how many times he's been beat up, watched his family get robbed or whatever else. So we have to humanize these experiences and say, hey, maybe it's just a 1% or 2% part, but what part did I play in that? What part did I play in that? And so, yeah, we have to be reflective and not be so quick to judge people. I'm sure all of us up here, maybe not the ladies, but at least the guys could tell some crazy stories, how we got away with something, and look at us now. Look at us now. And you have people who come from different neighborhoods whose daddy was a yard man and mama was a maid, and look at him now. But what do we say when we see them little kids playing now? Do we see them as the future X, Y, or Z? Or are we afraid and we cross the street? You know? And so I wanted to reserve some time for questions, and we're about 35 minutes out. So does anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a question as much as a comment.
Might stand up and use that outside voice if you don't mind.
Oh, you know,
Oh, we can do Maury Povich in here. Hold on.
in Third Ward, I'm known as Mama PK. And the reason is I'm a civil rights baby. I grew up on college campuses, Langston University, then my daddy went to Prairie View, and then he came to TSU where he retired. We had our schools, our doctor's office, it was all in the community. Then I came to Houston and went to Madison, where there were 2,000 white kids and only about 40 black kids. There may have been 100 brown kids, but there were 2 Asians. And the reason I knew that is because the 3 of us were the only ones in accelerated classes. And I think that had a lot to do with being raised on college campuses where education was primary. The long and the short of it is that my question, how many know who Dream Academy is?
U.S. Dream?
Yeah, U.S. Dream.
Okay. United Colors Education Center.
That's familiar.
They partnered together for almost 2 years, going and tutoring kids, and then they got all their funding cut. I had 2 twins in my tutoring class because I work for my daughter now. But the one was considered ADHD, and she said, I have an aberration, I can't help myself. I said, can you spell aberration? If you can't spell it, you don't have it. Start teaching them like kids. But for 2 years now, we haven't been able to do the work that we were doing. I'm a conflict resolution person. I'm a storyteller. I am a mediator. I've done the work, and I've been to 27 countries where I've done the work and been trained by people like the bishop in Rwanda. We need more of us to come together. I mean, I'm not trying to make a name for myself, but I do have 15 minutes of fame when I wrote in 1993 Black Bible Chronicles, which was dubbed the hip-hop Bible, and people confused me with, I must have been illiterate to write a Bible with slang. Well, it didn't have slang. Vivian Ayers was my mentor. We need more of us coming together. And I'm ready. I'm so ready. I'm easy to find. But we can do it. But we're going to have to do some cleanup first. There are more than 3,000 women of color who have lost their jobs already. How is that going to affect the future? Is that collateral damage? I tell people all the time this one thing. I used to be an ally, but then I had somebody who I've been an ally for say, I don't need an ally anymore, I need a co-conspirator. And now I know what that means. You got to do the heavy lifting. I want to be a Dolly Parton. Actually, I want to be a Brandon.
Aim higher.
Because the thing about racism is it's our biggest hurdle. And it's time to create an anti-racist society. And it's time to have what you saw in Chicago. I'm ready. Google me. You can find me. I'm happy to come. I'm doing a Sankofa initiative that is about honoring our past so that we can create a better future. And realize I have to reimagine every day when I get up and put my feet on the ground. So I'm ready. Anybody else?
Thank you. And while we're passing the mic to the next person, just share something I did with my kids. When I took the ACT, I got a 16. My daughter got a 33. Both of my kids scored in the top 95th percentile. And that was because at 7th grade, I started putting them in ACT and SAT prep. Imagine if there was a system like that that would go to these underserved communities and provide free ACT and SAT prep. Education is the best equalizer in America. You know, I feel like every day I'm living a dream. My goals in life were to never have my kids come home with the lights out and the refrigerator empty. That's how low my goals were. And that should tell you how I grew up. But so now I consider myself living a dream, and the only thing that changed my life was education. And Thurgood Marshall let me in to become a lawyer. So, you know, it's blessings. Okay, who was next? I'm going to let you decide who was next. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Seneca McQueen, Jr., and I'm from 3rd Ward. I served 24 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. And 20 of those years I served in administrative segregation. So I challenged the system. I realized the problem, one of the problems, there's many, but one of the problems of the system is racism. We had too many white Caucasians trying to control and instruct black and brown that didn't have no consciousness of their raising, and what the only objective was punishment. And my entire time there, every day I woke up with the thought of dying, that I didn't believe the next day I would live, because that's how incarceration really is. Y'all made a point, and I'm gonna be specific on that point. You were saying about how people get out and go do something else. Many times during so I've been litigating over 40 years against the system, and many times I say, you are creating criminals. So when I was in SEG, I challenged it, went to federal court, and they had said, psychologists said, anybody that's in this system 2 to 4 years will never be the same without treatment. So this is what's happening. People getting arrested, going right back out there, no treatment, what you think you're gonna get. Then you get arrested and you get abused and you go back out there. So you was abused first, then you get abused again, what you gonna get? So this is what's happening, and this is what needs to be changed. Thank you.
Absolutely. When 17-year-olds get sent to prison, I'm like, you're sending them to Harvard to go train for 2 years. Could you imagine going as naive as some of us were at 17, going to prison and staying there for 3 years, and the way you have to fight, like the story I told about my high school, how we had to carry the X-Acto knife. What you have to do at 17 in prison. And then they gonna let you out in 3 years? No help, no nothing? When we did bail reform, there was a Heaton study out of Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania, and it said the longer a nonviolent, low-level offender stayed in jail, the more likely they were to reoffend. When we did bail reform, it ended up saving the county millions and millions of dollars and cut recidivism. And so we have to be aware of what's in our community. So if you see somebody who was stealing 2 cans of Similac and they got a $1 bond, say, okay, well, great. At least they got out and they won't go commit other crimes because they had to sit in jail for 2 months, lost their apartment, lost their car. Now they're helpless and hopeless. And what else the choice do they have to resort to some type of criminal behavior? And I don't know who has the mic. Yes, ma'am. We'll do 2 more.
Okay. My name's Atremise Smith, and I'm a retired registered nurse. I'm also a mental health coach, and I'm a member of Real Life Christian Church. We're starting a ministry for special need kids and parents, and I'm so happy to be here because it's a brand new ministry, and I just wanted to lock arms with people that had the like minds.
Well, thank you.
We're going to adopt the schools.
Make sure you shake some hands after this is over now that you've been identified.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your talk. My question has to do, you mentioned capitalism and incentives. The 13th Amendment of the Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude except as a punishment of a crime. And in Texas, prison labor approximately generates $88 million a year. So the incentive to keep people in prison depends on prison labor, and also there are prisons for-profit prisons in Texas that house immigrants. How do we change those perverse incentives that keep people in prison?
Yeah, it's pretty deep. When I got to Austin as an intern, and I saw some really nice leather goods, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you can get you some. They came from the prison." I was like, "Wait a minute, I'm good. I don't want any slave labor materials." But the root of everything that's not too good is normally money. And so in this situation, it's another one of those situations where people are being exploited. In some of these prisons, people make $1 or $2 an hour, but they're probably doing $15 to $20, $25 worth of work per hour. And so as long as there's an incentive and somebody is making money, it's really hard. And oftentimes when there's these things in place and people are making all these dollars, we don't even know it. We don't even know what's going on. And so a lot of change in Harris County, they start having dashboards. So you can go to the jail and pull up the dashboard and see who's in there. We need dashboards and transparency in everything that's related to the government, because it's our resources. It's not their resources, it's our resources. And so things should be open so we can see what's being done with our money.
Hello, Mr. Jordan. My name is Jesse, and I have a question for you. How long do you think it would take to completely remove police racism and jail inequality in Harris County?
Well, and tell me your name again.
Jesse.
Jesse, that's gonna be the struggle for your generation. It's gonna take more Jessies coming in rooms like this, hearing stories, and then embracing what they hear and say, that person's skin, that person's income, they're no different than me. And then you'll look at your parents and say, I'm blessed. I used to be in court and wouldn't see people dressed like you. Who were 50, 60 years old, they wouldn't be dressed like you, right? So you are blessed, you have great role models, and I know that you're gonna be a leader because you already are, right? And so you take all this knowledge that you're getting here tonight, everything your parents they're telling you on a daily basis, and listen to them, embrace it. And I'm 49 now. By the time I'm 69, I expect to see you as a senator, a president, vice president, somewhere leading the people, and I want to come tap you on the shoulder one day, be like, hey, you remember me? You remember me? You can do it.
You sure I can't move out of the country soon?
Should I move out of the country too?
Sasha, we have one more. This is our last one.
Hi, good evening. I'm Shakira. I'm with the Harris County District Attorney's Office. I just had a question. I know the key word that's been coming up has been reimagining, right? But in practicality, I mean, you all know, the panelists and many of us understand that in practice, right, that can be pretty challenging, right? So I want to hear from you all, what is the biggest barrier with working with the other stakeholders in the criminal justice system to address racial and ethnic disparity? Because you have the courts, you have police agencies, you have the DA's office, and all these folks, and we've seen it before, and Dr. Brown knows this with the MacArthur Foundation grant, where we get resources to address these set issues, but when it comes to collecting data, requesting data, no one wants to be the culprit, but we know that these existing issues are gonna remain unless all of the stakeholders in the system are willing to work together for the greater good of the community. So I just want to hear a little bit more about what are some of those existing barriers right now with working with other stakeholders in the justice system.
Everybody looking at Brandon.
I know everyone's looking at Brandon.
Looking at me? I mean, I think you tie it back to what our young friend has said here, is that we need more people willing to sacrifice. Yeah. Right, and expend their own political capital rather than their self-interest to, like, do we really want to change this system, right? And I think my generation has failed. And others have failed. I think we just assume there's this natural trajectory towards equity and justice, and that's not how it works, right? You got to be willing to sacrifice and pay it forward and give of yourself. So I think, Shakira, just tying your answer to his is like, we have to decide that's what we want to make happen. And I think all the way back to what Larry, you have to humanize it. Like, this is about people and about the system that we want to see, and are we willing to put the work in and the resources in to making it different? So none of these things are too difficult to overcome. I think we can give ourselves excuses that, because this is here, this is too hard. We got to make it not too hard. We got to make the time and make the sacrifice. And I think there's just been an unwillingness sometimes. People are like, well, I hope that happens. Let me put that on the back burner, and I'll get to racism and injustice later. And I have to put it at the forefront of how we think about our systems in the first place.
Okay, so can we give our panelists a hand? Thank you all so much for coming to this event. My name is Sasha Leggett, and I serve as the Community Affairs and Advocacy Director for Commissioner Rodney Ellis. Sorry, this is actually not working. Okay. All right, great, thank you. Thanks, Tech. All right, so my name is Sasha Leggett, and I serve as the Director of Community Affairs and Advocacy here at the Office of Rodney Ellis. And I want to just thank you all so much for participating in this really important discussion. But our work is not finished. And so, we're here 5 years after the horrible murder of George Floyd. And as Commissioner Rodney Ellis said earlier in his remarks, there were a lot of reforms and policies put forth right after the murder and right after his funeral. And so a call to action would be to stay engaged, stay informed. On our upcoming Commissioner's Court this Thursday, there's an item on the court agenda that addresses these issues. We're gonna give updates. We're gonna find out what the progress is. And we wanna make sure everybody's paying attention, staying aware, and make sure you're continuing to stay in contact with our office as we together as a community and with all the stakeholders push for progress, because as Brandon just mentioned, if we decide that's what we want to do, we know that it is possible. So I want to thank you all so much for coming, and Commissioner will give some final remarks.
Sasha, thank you. It's been a very enlightening evening. You all are in the John and Hazel Biggers Center on this campus. And if you don't know who John Biggers was, you ought to just Google him. His art did more than just look beautiful. It had deep meaning in it. It made people think. And we started these series of discussions. I think it was Tuesday nights, right? First Tuesday, second Tuesday, third Tuesday. So much is going on this week. It's been 2 of them this month. but to bring you out to encourage you to get involved. So when George Floyd died, it was amazing. I hadn't seen anything like that. If you go back and Google it, those demonstrations all around the world, as the video said. And when the funeral here, there were several, when the funeral was coming here, I told my team, I said, look, these marches are important. They really are. They inspire people. They give us a sense of hope. It's also a sense of therapy. And they are very difficult to organize, in particular to organize them and not have violence. The one in Houston was amazing. But at the end of the marches, and they're important, as I said, at some point you have to have policies. You got to have something that's sustaining beyond the emotion of the moment. And that's what, in our office, we wanted to do. So they said, well, what policies do you want? Hell, I don't know. What have we been talking about? You didn't have Chat GPT then, but look around and just come up with best practice and just put it on the agenda. You got about 5 days to put this thing together. I say, well, put it. We're gonna stop to go to his funeral. If you don't happen in Houston to happen to be on the day of Commissioners Court meeting on a Tuesday. So I said, we're gonna obviously go to his funeral. We're gonna stop for that, but then we're gonna come back. And we passed them. Most of them were calling for various studies, about 11 items. We can give them to you. And I didn't want this moment to pass and not come back and do a gut check on what did we do. We asked for a racial disparity study. First one on the list. Took forever to do it. Because why did we not have the data? Because people didn't want to talk. They didn't want to talk about the truth. They want to wait for the moment to pass. A host of things. Some good things came out of it. We made significant progress in Harris County. Not nearly enough. Judge Jordan, I think, probably the most significant, I would say, criminal justice reform to happen in Harris County on a local level, probably, in the entire state over the last 50 years was misdemeanor bail reform. And that really came about by accident in many ways. The young guy who ended up suing Harris County wanted to sue Travis County. And he got into my office to see me because I was chairing the Board of the Innocence Project out of New York. And so I assume that's why he wanted to get in. Brandon, you or somebody got me to give him a meeting. At my age, even back then, I'm wondering, why is this man in my office with no socks on? Harvard educated and all that, but it's a generational thing, Karoon. And I'm just concentrating. So when he stepped out to take a phone call, I called one of the co-founders of the Innocence Project, Barry Scheck. I said, this kid? He seems pretty sharp. I know he went to Harvard. He couldn't get into the University of Texas or Thurgood Marshall. So he got a Harvard law degree. And I said, it sounds pretty amazing to me. The Equal Protection Clause is the argument he was making, that it would violate the Constitution to have a different set of standards for people who have money and those who don't, who have the same profile. Same argument that was used by Justice Ginsburg to give women their rights in this country. Thurgood Marshall used it first to give African Americans most of the rights we have. It was used for Hispanics. It's a really good argument. And so Barry said, I think it's a long shot, but it's a good shot. And so I said, well, if you want to sue somebody, you think they're liberal in Travis County until you start messing with those bail bondsmen, all that money rolling around. If you want to bring light to a dark place, sue Harris County. And some of the data you can get, because when I ask for it, if it's legal, I can help you save money on discovery. So you sue them. It is where I'm from. So he sued them. I never would have dreamed that Commissioner Franco Lee would have passed away, or I would end up in his seat. But I wasn't going to change my position because I was no longer a senator, state senator, saying sue my county because I'm on the board. So that's why I asked Judge Jordan, the DA at the time, and the sheriff to meet with the plaintiffs when it was legal, before we took our oath of office. And then Darrell, you when you got on the bench, you were very thoughtful. And it was courageous to go on that witness stand. You made a lot of enemies. Partially why some people want to put you behind bars, by the way, just saying, for what it's worth, for a minute. 2 days later, it was reversed. Some of them wanted to put me behind the bars, but they could go to hell. I'm still here. And they gone. You get that? But you know, it was a big deal. And it did save the county money, and it was the right thing to do. And even those critics will try and mix misdemeanor bail with felony bail. They try to conflate the issue because they were wrong. So Jesse, why are these issues so difficult? Because people in powerful positions want to stay in power. And it's easier to step on somebody and thwart progress instead of making a difference. But I love our close on this great line. I don't know if President Obama came up with it on his own. This meeting was to make the point that you are the change you're looking for. So thank you. Good night. Eat the food, or she paid for it. Thank you.